How many guys does he think have already made the team? Who's playing for spots tonight? Who to watch tonight? And more right now. Football at 4 at JF McMullen on the Boardwalk Honda hotline as John McMullen joins us. And all right, John, we've got preseason game number 3. Now, we had Quadri Ismail on earlier. He thinks you're going to see some of the Ravens starters. Have we learned anything more about the possibility of some of the Eagles starters tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think some will be out there. I mean, you kind of saw in Jacksonville. I mean, there's Malcolm and Brandon Graham, for instance. They're different types of players. I mean, they want to be out there. So they'll probably talk themselves onto the field. And there's a certain numbers game where you need certain guys to play. But we've seen particularly offensively, I mean, Doug has essentially not played anybody. And really since they shut down Dallas Goedert after the Tennessee game, the week 1 preseason game, I mean, you've seen nothing other than the running backs virtually. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the case again. And if they're out there, it's going to be really, really quick.
You tweeted this out earlier. Very few job openings for the Eagles tonight. Most are long shots. You got Greg Ward and Markin Michelle if they keep 6 receivers. So let's start with that spot there. Does that mean those 2 guys, hey, you 2 are going to get a lot of reps tonight. Go at it.
Yeah, and I think for them the bigger issue is, are they going to keep 6? And it's going to be difficult, I think, for the Eagles. One of the problems the Eagles have is there's a number of injured players they're going to have to carry on the final 53. Guys like Camus, Grugier-Hill, Nate Sudfeld, Crevan LeBlanc even could be in that category. Because understand, if you place somebody on injured reserve before the final 53, that means they're done for the season. So if you want to put somebody designated to return where they miss 8 games, 8 weeks, they have to be on that first 53 before you can put them on injured reserve. So all these minor injuries, and by minor, put that in quotations, obviously, but guys who aren't expected to be out for anywhere near 8 weeks, you got to make difficult decisions. Do you want to carry them on the roster? And in Camus' case, he'd be the one you'd say, well, there's no question he's going to be on the roster. The other guys, even Nate Sudfeld, those are difficult decisions now that Josh McCown is here, because Josh McCown is now the backup. So in theory, if you wanted to save a spot for another position, maybe you consider putting Josh McCown Nate Sudfeld on injured reserve.
I've been thinking about this, John, and something doesn't compute, because even if you did put Sudfeld on IR to attempt to keep, I guess, Clayton Thorson and go in with 3, eventually he's going to be back, because it sounds like with Sudfeld it's weeks, not months, and I just don't understand their plan. Their plan is to either have a $3 million a year third quarterback who's, may not even be active, I guess, or trying to sneak Thorson through the waivers onto the practice squad. But at some point, even if he's on the practice squad, you have 4 quarterbacks. And in practice, your starter gets 80 to 90% of the reps, your backup gets a little, and then you got a third quarterback to run the scout team. I don't know what you do with 4 quarterbacks. I've never seen a situation like that. So someone's got to go, and that means they wasted either a draft pick on Clayton or money on Nate. I don't understand really their plan. Do you have an idea of where they're going?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in the past where people have carried 4, very rarely, but it does happen that you don't have enough work, and you're exactly right. I mean, the only reason the Eagles would do that is, and we've seen this with Howie before, he doesn't want to admit mistakes on draft picks. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't want to fully cut the cord on Clayton Thorson. Look, he's been better recently. Early in camp, and obviously in the first preseason game, no one would have batted an eye if they cut him and just moved on. He has played better recently, obviously in Jacksonville, and even in practice, he's been much improved. And now it starts to bubble up again. What do you do? The interesting part with the McCown signing, and I said this before on the show, and I said I didn't think the Eagles would sign a veteran quarterback, because that, to me, would indicate nothing about Cody Kessler, more about they didn't have confidence in Nate Sudfeld to be the backup quarterback. And I think that's where we are. Mm-hmm. That signing had more to do with Nate Sudfeld than it had to do about getting through 2 or 3 weeks of Cody Kessler. Because you could have bitten down, taken the medicine, and gotten through that if you were confident in Nate Sudfeld to be the long-term backup quarterback. The Eagles aren't. And that was confirmed by multiple sources who told me they reached out to Josh McCown in July before training camp started. Mm-hmm. So that tells me they saw Nate Sudfeld in the offseason and said he's not ready. And they were trying and working behind the scenes to get Josh McCown here.
And I get that and agree, but I also have gathered that they are not looking to move on from Sudfeld, where now you would say they have the perfect opportunity. They still plan to keep him, is what I'm hearing. So, again, that's where I go back to, well, if you didn't have confidence in him and you've got a developmental kid in Thorson and you've got your veteran in Josh McCown, what are you doing?
Well, I think it's about more than this year. I think it's about next year. Josh is 40. He's not a long-term answer as a backup quarterback. So at some point you hope that maybe the processing speed picks up with Nate Sudfeld. But the counter argument to that is if you're on injured reserve and you're going to go that route, you can't practice. So how is he going to improve if you can't practice at all?
Exactly.
Until you get to the off season. So it is a bit of a mess. I would agree with that. I think the easiest way out of it is to just admit Clayton Thorson isn't quite what you expected, but Howie, again, has had difficulty doing that with draft choices, especially early.
Mm-hmm. John McMullen's with us, Eagles-Ravens tonight. We also, that quarterback thing, what do we see at that position tonight then? I mean, are you going to play a couple of guys who aren't going to – and we know Sudfeld's out, obviously, but do you give time to 2 guys, Kessler and Thorson, who are not going to play at all? Do we get to see McCown and see how he's out there? Does Wentz get any snaps? I mean, what do you think we see tonight?
I can't imagine you're going to see Carson, and more so from the fact that I don't see how you're going to see any of the offensive linemen. I mean, Lane has been shut down. We know that. So I don't think they're going to play Jason Peters. We know at 37 years old they have him on a pitch count. Jason Kelsey's been dealing with a bit of a knee injury, nothing serious, but I don't think they're going to push him in there. Brandon Brooks is obviously not cleared. So the only one you would have out there is Isaac Seumalo, and if you're not going to play the other 4, you're not going to play him either. And if you're not going to play the starting offensive line, you're not going to play the starting quarterback. So that's where I am with that. And then you look, there's been a number of coaches, one of them Sean McVay, Frank Reich, Matt Nagy, amongst them who have flat out said they're not playing their starters. You go back to the Rams last season, I think a lot of people forget they didn't play anybody last season in the preseason. They got criticized a lot. And I was one of them, I freely admitted, because I thought Jared Goff still needs reps. Well, they proved me wrong because they started out, I think, 8-0 and were averaging 34, 35 points a game. And Jared Goff didn't take one preseason snap. So I think that's where the Eagles are.
John, you also tweet about another spot, I guess, tonight is we talked a little bit yesterday, but you got Adams versus Smallwood if they keep 5 running backs, but they probably won't. So you think Clement's going to be the 4th, and then Adams and Smallwood is just if somebody makes them keep them.
Yeah, and I think this team should, and I often talk about when people look at the final 53, sometimes they don't look about the future because it is more about just this year. Because I point to Jordan Howard. No matter what happens with Jordan Howard, he's going to be one and done. If he plays well, the Eagles don't value that position. They're not going to want to pay him a significant salary. And if he plays poorly, well, they're not going to want him back. So he's a one-and-done player. And if you're trying to set up that committee approach, which Doug has used since he got here, well, who's the one guy that offers similar traits that could be a compliment to Miles Sanders? And that's Josh Adams. So I think they should take a long, hard look at potentially keeping him. I don't know if they will. They will have to keep 5 backs. They're not going to cut one of the top 4. So that's more of, if they keep 5, then you start putting Josh Adams and even Wendell Smallwood in the conversation. If they only keep 4, it's pretty much locked in.
So allow me to put the cart before the horse a little bit here, John. Let's say Miles Sanders looks very good tonight in his action and over the next 2 weeks has convinced the coaches that he's ready to be – I mean, they'll take a few more – a little growing pains with him, but they think he can be a 3-down running back from the season opener. What would that force them to maybe look around the league and see if they couldn't shop Jordan Howard, and then that would allow them to maybe keep a Josh Adams as a goal line back or a short yardage big back if they need for that situation?
Yeah, it's not the craziest thing. I would say the one thing that steers me in a different direction is that Miles has been the first-team kickoff returner. They've gone through that with the Ravens this week, and that tells me the plan today is still Jordan Howard to be the starting running back.
I agree with you on that. I was just trying to put a scenario out there that would spark interesting sports talk.
I think it makes some sense. I definitely think it makes some sense, and just as I explained, it's one and done anyway for Jordan Howard. So if you come to that decision and say, well, you know what, Miles is our best back anyway, and Miles is going to get the majority of the playing time, yeah, why not think that way? I don't think the Eagles are there yet. I think it has to do more with Carson Wentz than anything else, and that $108 million guaranteed and a rookie running back. And I talked about this yesterday with Mike. Miles held up pretty well on the blitz against Jacksonville.
Yep.
But he wasn't asked to do it a lot at Penn State. It's not to say he can't do it, but I'm not sure the Eagles are comfortable yet with that scenario.
You've also got a couple other things for tonight. John McMullen at JF McMullen. We talked yesterday about Rodgers being hurt, and that, I guess, opens up a spot there. I don't know if that's all that exciting, the third tight end, but Will Tye kind of puts himself in position now to make the team.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Josh Perkins, I would say, would be the leader. And it's kind of what flavor do you like? Because Josh is a flex tight end, and Will Tye is more of a Y back, more of an inline tight end. So it's kind of what you want. And, you know, when we talked about 11 versus 12 personnel, and the Eagles, if anything, are going to up 2 tight ends because Ertz and Goddard are both so good. And I think that will be the case when Dallas is completely healthy in week 1. If you want to play and you want to go heavy 12 personnel, that means you probably should keep 4 tight ends, to be honest.
Yep.
And that could put Josh Perkins and Will Tye in the conversation. And I think that Richard Rodgers injury is bigger than people understand because the Eagles like him a lot. He doesn't have a ton of speed, but he's got great hands, and he's a capable inline blocker. So he's a well-rounded guy, and I think we'll see. I mean, I expected him to go on IR. I expected him to announce a season-ending injury. They didn't do that. They just called it multiple weeks. He's another guy that if he can be back at some point this season, and certainly before 8 weeks, you have to at least enter into the conversation. He's in that category that you might have to carry him on the 53.
John, the trade for today, Bruce Hector for Rudy Ford, the safety from Arizona, who's played a little bit and also has some kick return experience. Is that kind of a way of the Eagles kind of trying to replace what they thought they were going to have in Blake Countess? And if he plays well, does it make them maybe consider keeping 5 safeties?
Well, this is interesting because John tweeted this out 7 hours ago, but that Hester was trying to catch Ridgeway, and that Phipp, will he pound the table to keep an extra linebacker? Phipp, obviously the special teams coach.
Right.
Instead of keeping an extra linebacker, did they go out and get him an extra special teams guy to play safety?
Well, usually they play a little bit different on the units, so we'll have to see what they do there. But I'll let John kind of weigh in on what he thinks on that.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I tweeted out as well about Blake Countess. I think when the Eagles picked him back up off waivers, there was this expectation because he was a pretty good special teams player with the Rams, and they drafted him, so they understood him. Mm-hmm. Very similar player in the fact that he's got some kick return ability as well, and it didn't work out, and maybe they're trying to replace that. And, I think Dave you saw it last year. And the Eagles picked up DJ Alexander off waivers just specifically for special teams. And this is one of those player-for-player trades that Howie does every August now. And it makes sense because
more than once
Bruce
now.
Hector, yeah, and he did it with Eli Harold as well. Yeah, Bruce was not going to make this team. Numbers were against him. Arizona needs defensive tackle help. And the Cardinals are bad, but probably their best position is safety, where they have DJ Swearinger and Baker as well. So they're actually pretty good at safety, and they have a couple rookies on top of that. So it makes sense from both sides, and you get to take a good look at him up close for 2 weeks. And, yeah, I think his path to the roster is special teams. And if he proves to be a good special teams player, I think he's got a very good chance. And if he's on the roster, that means the Eagles are going to keep 5 safeties.
What a world. What a world the NFL has become. I remember when the Packers once kept 5 tight ends and everybody thought they were like reinventing the wheel and revolutionizing offense. And here the Eagles are keeping 5 safeties, right? Maybe 5 safeties. What a world, right?
Yeah, and, it's
makes sense.
Say 5 because I could see them moving on from Cyprien. I think he's going to make this team, but he's one of those vested guys. And you know how, especially Jeff, how these teams are. If you're on the week 1 roster, your entire salary is guaranteed if you're vested. So Cyprien might be one of those guys who they say, you know what, we're going to cut him and bring him back. And they could go about it that way. I do think Sendejo's made this team. I think he's the 3rd safety. So there's a lot of different avenues they can go. And oh, by the way, Rudy's only going to be here for 2 weeks, and he might only be here for 2 weeks. If he doesn't show anything, they could just cut him.
By the way, John, at JF McMullen, you've got 47 roster spots locked in, which means you've got 6 up for grabs, basically, sees between now and next week against the Jets.
Yeah, not a lot. And if you're keeping – remember, I didn't put Sudfeld on that 47. I didn't put Rodgers on that 47. I didn't put LeBlanc on that 47. So if you're carrying these injured guys, there's even less jobs to be won. And that's – we've been talking about it since the spring. There's not a lot of room. This is a very deep team. This is a team that already knows where they are, already knows what they have. And then another guy I didn't put on there was Stefan Wisniewski. So if you're keeping him, that's 51. So
Quadri Ismail was on earlier, and his takeaway was Philly fans will be pleased with not only the first team, but the roster depth. He was very impressed at the depth. Let me get Jeff and I kind of went back and forth on this earlier. Any scenario, Howard does not make the team.
I was just mentioning that with Jeff. I don't think so. I understand the logic if you believe Miles Sanders is ready right away off the bat. I don't think they're there yet. And I think it was a clear indication that he's still the number 1 kick returner. If he's going to be the starting running back, he's not taking first-team reps at kickoff returner. So as we are now, and remember, we're 17 whatever days from the regular season opener. As of today, he's not the starting running back. Could that change in 2.5 weeks? Yeah, but I doubt it. I would say less than a 10% chance.
All right.
I would agree with John.
It all goes down tonight, and you can check it out right here on the radio. 97.3 ESPN's coverage begins at 6:30. And, of course, at JF McMullen will be in attendance at the Lincoln Financial Field as the Eagles take on the Baltimore Ravens. And we'll have it all, the recap on tomorrow's show. Who bettered their standing to make this Eagles team, which is very, very deep, as we've kind of chronicled. John, thanks, man.
All right. Thank you, guys.